Who stood out at the Senior Bowl that'll fit the Steelers' needs in the NFL draft? We'll talk about that, do our first mock draft of the season, as well as address your calls and some final grades on the linebackers, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 back in bonus bets if you hit on your first bet of $5. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, everyone, the Senior Bowl happened this past weekend, and we've kind of kept a little bit of tabs, but I want to take a quick step back to look at some of the positions of need. And I think the Senior Bowl brought some good news to the Steelers and their offseason hopes of adding to their roster. Granted, I don't think that was the case at quarterback, and if you're hoping the Steelers find their quarterback in this NFL draft class, more power to you. But I think that the Steelers definitely have needs across the roster, and for a lot of those needs, there were some interesting results that I thought came out for the Steelers and guys that they were able to look at. Now, we did talk about how Mike Tomlin was in Mobile and who he was looking at closely, and obviously offensive linemen are there. And that might be the crux of it, is that the Steelers definitely got to look at what's being considered a very good offensive line class, and not just good for the sense of that the top guys are really good, but good for that there are a lot of top guys who are really good, but also a lot of depth guys who are really good, guys that will be there on day 2 of the draft. And that could make it really intriguing because, in my opinion, the Steelers could really benefit themselves if they're able to double dip and get the offensive line in this draft. And that's an offensive tackle, either right or left, and a center. And I know some of you probably thinking like, wait a second, Chris, what do you mean right or left tackle? They already have a left tackle in Broderick Jones, just moving back to left. Hear me out. If the Steelers get a prime left tackle in this draft class, what do you care if it's Broderick Jones or that prime left tackle in the left tackle spot? If both of them are playing well and they're at either left or right, just see who's the better one at each spot and go from there. I think that's the answer here the Steelers need to go for. Is they need to go get 2 offensive linemen in this draft, unless they sign one in free agency. But let's be real, offensive linemen worth their salt in free agency don't come cheap. And I think the Steelers, it would really help them for what they're doing with their roster to find 2 guys in this draft class. And again, this draft class appears to be good. Now, there's obvious guys like Jackson Powers-Johnson, who, according to everyone that I pay attention to, who covers the Senior Bowl, who went to the Senior Bowl, was in Mobile. And we'll have Alan Saunders on later this week to get a follow-up from him. But he even said it, when he was on the show last week. Jackson Powers-Johnson might have been the biggest winner of the Senior Bowl. He dominated. He was at center and guard, dominated both situations, looked really great. His tape shows a really strong guy who knows how to use his hands, knows how to use his feet. I think that if the Steelers want Jackson Powers-Johnson, they absolutely have to take him at 20. I think they can get him at 20. Just looking at where centers are normally taken in the NFL draft, that's around the range. And it would take someone either ahead of the Steelers taking him or someone jumping ahead of the Steelers. And if that happens, I still think they'd have a shot at a guy like Zach Frazier out of West Virginia, who I think they'd also really like. But Jackson Powers-Johnson, to me, is a really good dude right there. Now, the question will be, who else do they get with him? And if you look at offensive tackle, there's quite a few guys that are catch people's eyes. 2 guys that really impressed there were Tyler Guyton of Oklahoma, who is just a physically huge athlete. He's 6'7", 328, moves very well, very raw as a player. Alan talked about him on our show last week. So he's one of those guys, but also if you look around and you see, at the offensive tackle position, Oregon State, Tylius Fuaga, he's another offensive tackle who I think is more well-rounded. Now, my opinion, Fuaga is going to probably go top 15. I think he's going to go in the range that Broderick Jones was. So I'm not sure if they could get him, but Guyton might be raw enough that he falls down to that range. And if the Steelers prefer to get a tackle than a center at 20, that could be an option there. But there's also depth guys that go further down into this tackle class who could be worth a look. And again, they're not as polished guys, but still, if you could get a very good offensive tackle in the second round, that could still be something that works in your advantage if you're the Steelers. If you remember, Marcus Gilbert was a very underrated and very good offensive tackle for the Steelers, and he was taken in the second round. I believe it was the 2012 draft. I might be missing. I think it was the second round of that draft. But if you're picking a center, that means you're missing out on Fuaga, on J.C. Latham of Alabama, probably on Amarius Mims of Georgia. But if you go to that second round, guys like Patrick Paul out of Houston, if he's there, that could work. Troy Faltano out of Washington, he's another one that you could look at. Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU. Those are the guys that you're talking about ranging in that area to take them. So those are the options there. Other players that kind of stood out. I think one person that universally everyone's talking about as far as a skill player is Roman Wilson, the wide receiver out of Michigan. Looked like he had really solid hands and looked like an amazing route runner. And honestly, I think if you added a really good route runner to this Steelers offense, that would make it a big asset. He could be the perfect complement to George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. And with Johnson's contract ending up this year, after this year, that could be the option to keep a really good route runner on the team if he comes in and he shows that at a high level as a rookie and then continues to develop. So options are available there. So Roman Wilson there. I also think that there was an interesting mix of safeties shown at the Senior Bowl. Two guys that I've had my eyes on and I think impressed enough at safety, Tyke Smith out of Georgia and Cam Kinchens out of Miami. Both of these guys, I've kind of kept an eye on. I think they'd be really good day 2 picks for the Steelers. And if you could get a good athletic safety to pair with Minkah Fitzpatrick without, having to pay, a lot in your salary cap, that could be in a way to, make the safety position complete again. And then have a safety who can play a role that allows Minkah Fitzpatrick to get back to his roaming role as a free safety. And also at cornerback, guys like Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo, who I think is pushing himself into the first round conversation. Also guys like Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. I think that there's guys there who I think could certainly make some noise there. And there's other players at other positions, but those were guys that seem to be standouts at the Senior Bowl. And with that, I wanted to start off the mock draft season with my first mock draft. And this is just an initial, just playing around with what I was able to see at the Senior Bowl, what I've been hearing, and just based off of what I think the Steelers needs could fit. This is not a final draft or anything. It's just a first round for the heck of it, just fun mock draft that we could talk about here, and I can hear back you guys' thoughts on how the Steelers do. We will start up mock draft Monday next week after the Super Bowl, so don't worry, that's coming. But just so y'all see some of my picks and some of the ideas that I've got going down for the Steelers, I got them, and this is without any trades, without anything crazy, just straight up where their picks are. At 20th in the first round, I had Jackson Powers Johnson. He fell to them. I used the PFF mock draft simulator, by the way. The Jackson Powers Johnson, center out of Oregon. Just perfect fit. I think that's a great pick for the Steelers. If he's there, you take him. Second round, Patrick Paul, tackle out of Houston. I think he could be a really good complement to Broderick Jones. 52, good value. Get him right there. Third round, I do think they're going to try to take a wide receiver somewhere earlier in this draft. And Roman Wilson was there in the third round. I don't know if he'll actually be there, but if he is, I think that'd be a heck of a pick and a perfect fit for them. Then remember in the fourth round, they got with their trade, I think it was with Kevin Dotson, they got a fourth round pick back for him. So they have back-to-back picks at 119 and 120. And I went and addressed the secondary twice. Jaden Hicks, safety out of Washington State, bigger body guy who I think could try to help with a strong safety position to free up Minkah Fitzpatrick. And then I got Kyrie Jackson, the cornerback out of Oregon, who I was telling you guys about. He's 6'3", long-armed, good athlete. He's a guy that I think if you can bring in, he's just like the type of Joey Porter Jr. and Corey Trice, another long-armed, athletic cornerback who can be sticky in coverage and tough to shake off. Then rounding out, I got Tyron Hopper as a linebacker out of Missouri. Not going to pretend like I studied this guy a whole lot. Just think linebacker would be another thing they could add to. And then Torrey Taylor, a punter out of Iowa. Again, not going to pretend and lie to y'all like I study punters or anything like that. But I figure if he punts for Iowa, he's got to be good because Iowa punts a lot, and they need a punter in Pittsburgh. So anyways, there's my first mock draft. Let me know what you think, if you agree, if what you do. Again, we will start up our mock draft Mondays where you all submit your mock drafts to me on Twitter and the Locked On Steelers Facebook group, and then we'll get you on the show with that way week in and week out. So stay tuned for those, but we have a lot more to talk about. We're taking a lot more of your calls in the show, 3 calls in particular that we bring up today to answer a lot of your questions. Stay here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We still got a lot to cover. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by DoorDash. Why root for your team on an empty stomach? You can order DoorDash now and save on all your football watch party favorites, especially for the Super Bowl. Order pizza, wings, pop, burgers, or even just the buns or any ingredients you want to make something for the Super Bowl party right here with DoorDash. Personally, I like to order Big Shot Bobs or Permanis, get them straight to my door, get me ready so I'm good to go and can sit on the couch and enjoy great food with a great game, and that all can happen with DoorDash. Download DoorDash as an app to your phone, and right now, new customers get up to 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app, just enter the code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED 23, subject to change, terms and conditions apply. If you want even more value, you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders when you get a Dash Pass membership. Get prepared before game day. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash. Then get ready to watch the Super Bowl. Again, you can get 50% off on your first order, get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you sign up for DoorDash. Download the DoorDash app today and enter code LOCKED23, subject to change, terms and conditions apply. We're also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience, that's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here today. Let's get into some of your calls. As always, you can call into the show, 412-223-6644. When you call in, get sure to leave your name, where you're from, and keep your question under a minute. We got a lot to get into here, so let's start with some questions here. We've got a friend, Kevin from Toledo, asking a question about Mike Tomlin's coaching, offensive coordinator hiring history. And this call came before Arthur Smith was the pick, but I still think it brings up an interesting discussion point. Here's Kevin.
Yeah, this is Kevin from Toledo. My question that I have for you is, knowing the history, especially under Mike Tomlin, how confident are you that we will make the right selection at offensive coordinator? I know under Bill Coward, he always kept a high-powered staff on both sides of the ball, especially coordinators. And I just want to know, how confident are you in Mike Tomlin making the right selection for OC, and I mean, I don't agree with the DC either, but we're talking about OC right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your question, Kevin from Toledo. All right, let's get into this. So Mike Tomlin, it's less about the history itself, because if you look at the recent history, you don't like it because Matt Cannon and Randy Fichtner are the last two. But that's also half of the coordinators that Mike Tomlin's hired. The last two, the other two that he had in the organization, Bruce Arians, who he could have sent packing when he arrived to Pittsburgh, but instead he promoted him from, I think it was receivers coach to offensive coordinator. Really worked for the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger really trusted him, and he developed an offense that worked, and they won a Super Bowl with him. Todd Haley came in. He also was another great addition, and I thought he improved Ben Roethlisberger's career, got some of his best numbers overall. And if you look at I think the difference here between those guys and Fichtner, I think Bruce Arians was a lot more proven than, say, a Matt Canada. He's very similar to Fichtner in that he was around the Steelers for a while, but Todd Haley's an experienced offensive coordinator who tried to be a head coach, didn't work, came back, went back to trying to be an OC, and that's very much what Arthur Smith is like. And if that's the kind of coach that the Steelers are hiring, I think that there's reason to believe that, hey, you can put some faith in, like, maybe this guy is going to be a quality OC for the Steelers. I think there's some people who are going to be hung up on saying, like, wait a second, Matt Canada stunk. Why would you ever trust this organization or whoever was involved with that again? I still think there were some different circumstances going on with Matt Canada. One, Randy Fichtner, when he was brought up to the Steelers OC position, it was specifically what Ben Roethlisberger wanted. It was his guy. These guys worked together. They were close, and Ben Roethlisberger wanted a guy who could tailor the offense around him and basically it be Ben's offense when Randy Fichtner was there. And when Matt Canada took over, I doubt that Matt Canada actually had much control of everything when he first took over on the scene. But when it became his offense after Ben Roethlisberger left, still didn't really get anything good of him, and that was not that was part of the organizational problems that they had. And I think that the Steelers needed a guy who wouldn't be an experiment, a guy who's been proven in the NFL as an OC and is respected for that. And that's who Arthur Smith is. So if you're judging Arthur Smith based off of Matt Canada, I understand you're a Steelers fan. You're probably panicking there. But I don't think that that's the logical approach here. I think the logical approach is to look at what the Steelers have done with former offensive coordinators. And on the note of, Bill Cowher and offensive coordinators, Bill Cowher didn't exactly have, elite offensive coordinators all the time. I think he started off Ron Earhart. That was a good one. He was through the early to mid 90s, get some good things there. Chan Gailey was a decent one, but Ray Sherman wasn't really good in 1998, only lasted a season. Kevin Gilbride wasn't really good in 99 and 2000. I really liked Mike Mularkey, and Ken Wisenhunt didn't work out. Did work out. So those it's some good, some bad, just like Mike Tomlin. Arians and Haley good, Canada and Fichtner bad. So I think it's just a mix of things. I think it's also dependent on your talent, because you know what? Maybe Mike Mularkey just came at the right time for a lot of those weapons maturing. Alan Faneca was coming up. Cordell Stewart was playing better. Hines Ward was stepping up. Plaxico Burress was emerging. That was a good time for the offense. And maybe if like Kevin Gilbride was stuck around, maybe it would have gotten there. But I think that right now, Arthur Smith, he's again a guy that fits he's the kind of coordinator that can work with the talents the Steelers have had and has a good track record of getting those guys to perform well when you look back at how the Titans offense ran then. So I think if I was to look at Mike Tomlin's history and use that to justify anything moving forward, I would say, hey, it's a mixed past. But I do think that there's merit to when they make this kind of a hire, it's been successful. Let's keep rolling with the questions here. Let's go with another coaching related thing, and that comes from Shay in Los Angeles.
Hey Chris, how you doing? My name is Shay. I'm calling from Los Angeles, California. My question is definitely about our offensive coordinator position. Of course, we still got to do some research and everything, but Arthur Smith, what is the, I keep hearing a rumor that he's coming in with a package deal and he might bring Mike Munchak. So I want to know your opinion, and if he is the one, I wouldn't be surprised because, look, the name is not sexy, but his experience is really very valuable, and he's bringing in somebody that used to work for us, and when Mike Munchak was here, we had the best offensive line. So I just want your opinion, and what do you hear about that, or is that just a rumor? All right, love the show. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate you for calling in, Shay. Remember, call in 412-223-6644 to get your question on the show, just like Shay and Kevin here. So here's the thing. I've heard that this is an idea. I don't think it's a given thing that Mike Munchak would be coming back to the Steelers. One, I think that Pat Myers kind of done a good job getting improvement out of young guys like Broderick Jones, like James Daniels, guys that they've developed, and the offensive line has improved in his time. I think that the thing that people forget with Mike Munchak is that when Mike Munchak took over, he was coming into like the Steelers investing into guys like Pouncey and DeCastro and Gilbert, and he had a great core to work with, and that allowed for him to kind of work his stuff on that group. And it might not have necessarily gone as well if it's probably the guys that they had in the early 2020s. that didn't work out. So all that to say, I think that Mike Munchak, if he came back, great. But I also don't think that it's a necessary thing. I think the biggest thing is get the Steelers a center and a tackle. And I think Pat Meyer, with the things that he's done so far for the offensive line, I think you can see a continued upward trajectory for that group. And they'd play well. And again, I'm not saying don't bring back Mike Munchak. I just don't think it's the must-have move that some people make it out to be. I think that the Steelers offensive line, just with a couple more really good really good draft picks, they're right in the mix for that. I think in a few years they'd be in conversations to be among the best offensive lines in football, because I think Broderick Jones is that good. I think James Daniels is a really good right guard right now. And if they got a Jackson Powers Johnson and like one other good left tackle or a good right tackle, wherever Broderick Jones wouldn't be, and if Seumalo's still around, that group could be punishing people and develop a really strong reputation, which is what I think the Steelers team needs. But again, I'm not against Mike Munchak. I just don't know if it's exactly going to happen. So last question here goes to Nate Glass, and this is another Arthur Smith-related question via someone he has a connection to. Take it away, Nate.
Hey, Chris. Nate Glass from California. With our new signing of Arthur Smith, I want to get your thoughts on possibly us bringing in a veteran quarterback. One that I have in mind is Ryan Tannehill. He'll be 35 years old, but he knows Arthur Smith's offense, and I think he could be a pretty good mentor to Kenny. I just want to get your thoughts on that. Do you think the Steelers should bring in Ryan Tannehill as competition / that quarterback whisperer for Kenny Pickett, since he knows Arthur Smith's offense and that Arthur Smith is our current offensive coordinator? Thanks for taking my call. Have a good day.
Thank you, Nate. Nate's one of our faithful callers. I make calls all the time. Thank you, Nate, for calling in and getting your thoughts on the show. Okay, so to answer Nate's question, I want to look at Ryan Tannehill. He'll be 36 next season. If the Steelers could get him for, say, $5 to $7 million, that'd be cool. But I'm not so sure that he might go for that. He might get some more money elsewhere. I also think that he would be a good mix with a guy like Mason Rudolph, because if the Steelers were able to get both those guys, that'd be really good. But here's my thing, and I've said this before. I'm not 100% sure that Mason Rudolph won't get a better contract offer from somewhere else. I think that the Steelers should make considerable efforts to keep him. And if they did, see if they could get a guy in Ryan Tannehill that wouldn't be too expensive. But I think Tannehill would work out. He's a guy that knows Arthur Smith, knows his system. There could be a rekindling there. And especially if you don't get Mason Rudolph, I think Ryan Tannehill should be the move. Cut Mitch Trubisky, bring in Ryan Tannehill, and maybe draft like a day 3 quarterback in the NFL draft. But Ryan Tannehill isn't some superstar, and he's not going to fix everything, nor is he going to be the guy for you. But in his 2 years with Arthur Smith, if you go back to those 2 years with the Titans, he had passer ratings of 117.5 and 106.5. Those are higher passer ratings in those 2 years than any years that Ben Roethlisberger had. And listen closely. I am not saying that Ryan Tannehill is in any way comparable to Ben Roethlisberger, because I know some of you are going to mishear that and think I'm saying that, and I'm not. But my point is, if you look at how he was productive in Arthur Smith's system, there's a reason to say, hey, this could be a system for a steady quarterback. Ryan Tannehill was never a superstar. He was never a guy that was considered among the elite. And I think there was a point there in 2019 or 2020 where people wondered it for maybe 2 weeks and then realized, oh, no, that's the system and Derrick Henry, and that's what he's just playing well in that. But he could be an example to Kenny Pickett or to whoever you want your quarterback to be of what that could be and how to work with that and how to work with Arthur Smith. So it's a good question from Nate. If they don't get Mason Rudolph, I think Ryan Tannehill should be a prime move, and I don't think he'd be that expensive of a guy. If they do get Mason Rudolph, see how much Ryan Tannehill costs, and if he's a little too much because you don't want to sink too much money into 2 backup quarterbacks, then you go and draft your guy. But that's how I think they should handle the Ryan Tannehill situation. Again, don't misquote me on the Ben Roethlisberger stuff. Anyways, let's get to our last segment here. It's going to be final grades on the linebackers, the off-ball linebackers specifically, which gets a question going on who they should bring back moving forward. All that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, want to remind you that this show is also sponsored by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the #1 sportsbook in America. Right now, new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about getting the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. And the best place to do that is on FanDuel because there's so many ways to win at the end of the season. You can win with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, who scores a touchdown for us first, how many points will we score, how many field goals will we kick. There's just so many prop bets that you can go right now and explore and find for you to stack up your best parlays for Super Bowl Sundays. And new customers join today and you'll get $200 off or $200 back in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into these final grades here. We've been doing our series. We're coming to a close here soon. We have these guys, the edge rushers, and then I think the specialists are the last 3 groups that I have not done yet. So just a reminder, after every game, if you follow the show all season long, we had grades where you got either 1 to 3 stars or 1 to 3 skulls. Stars good, skulls bad, you get it to say. So what I did was I tally up at the end of the season who has the more stars, skulls, and of course, bus tickets for absolutely terrible play, which there were some people who got that grade, including one in this group. So let's get into some of those guys because the Steelers played a lot of linebackers this year. These are the ones who got graded. So let's take a look at them first. Let's start with Myles Jack, who came in to the Steelers season this year. And I thought Myles did okay for what he was asked for. Now, I think that if Myles Jack had a larger sample size, it would have been tougher on him because teams could have picked him a little bit more because, he just got off of, doing normal life things and not being an NFL linebacker. But when he was in, 3 stars, 1 skull. Not bad. That's good enough for a C+. He was a good guy to bring in there. I'm not sure the Steelers should try to bring him back and just keep rekindling that. But, for a guy who came in because the Steelers were decimated at injury at this position, I think he did pretty well for himself. Other guys who fit in there, Michael Walker, 2 stars, 5 skulls, gave him a C- on the year for that. Again, he was a practice squatter, younger, and he got in good position at times. He's a guy who missed some tackles in some key spots, and he's not anybody that's going to be a game changer. But I think that he was reliable enough that as a 4th or 5th option, he was serviceable, and you could live with that. I think that was okay. Not a plus player, but not a big minus player either. And that's what you need on your practice squad, or sometimes just guys who can hold the line. Now, one guy that has been a very interesting player to follow as far as how Steelers fans feel about him is Mark Robinson. Now, if you remember Mark Robinson, he was the 7th round pick a couple years back, a guy who converted from running back to linebacker late in his college career and was still figuring things out. On the year, I gave him 5 stars and 5 skulls, but he also had a bus ticket game because he was really bad on some games. Mark Robinson, and that's, by the way, it's good enough for a D+ because of the bus ticket. If it was, it would have been a straight C. But I look at Mark Robinson, and this guy, when it's just straight up, there's nothing to be confused about. It's just straight up, it's a dive, and the running back's coming right at you, and he has a job either take on the fullback or take on the running back, or blow somebody up in the hole. He is going to win those, I'd say, 8 out of 10 times, and that's really good. You want that. But as soon as you start putting in pass coverage or having him have to decipher things, that's when things are still slowing down for Mark, and he's kind of, behind the steps there. And that's not a thing you can have from your linebackers. Your linebackers need to be the quarterbacks of your defense, and that's where he struggled the most. If he can improve at that in the mental side of being a linebacker, he'll be fun because he'll be a heavy hitter and he can grow there. And heck, the Steelers have some veteran linebackers on their roster right now who can help him with that. So in fact, let's get to some of those guys because they're also here too. Now, the next 2 guys, of course, are kind of limited in their grades because they got hurt early on this year. And we'll start with Cole Holcomb, 8 stars, 5 skulls, a C+. And I feel it feels kind of rough on Cole Holcomb because I thought he was good when he was with the Steelers. And if he had more, or early on, I thought he struggled, but he started to find his place in the middle part of the year. And if he had more time being healthy, I think he would have been a B-plus player because he was starting to really put things together for the Steelers when he got injured. But again, you can't let that erase the early games. Just means that, hey, stacking up on the year, this is where he's at. I think that if he comes back healthy next year and he builds upon where he was, when he got injured at the, in the middle of this past season, I think he'll be a good linebacker for the Steelers and still an asset to the team. That being said, I thought Quan Alexander, the other guy who went down for the whole season, I thought he was kind of, a really good player for the Steelers. 8 stars, 2 skulls. That's good enough for a B- grade in our system. I think that Quan is a heck of an athlete. He's just dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his career. That's the thing that's going to be tough about bringing him back, is that if you're bringing him back, you know that injury history is there, and you're going to be kicking yourself if you lose him again for another whole season, because when he went down, after Cole Holcomb went down, the Steelers were in a big hurt piece, and you cannot afford to put yourself in that position again. But the guy who did not get knocked out for the season, dealt with injuries though, and the guy who I thought was the best linebacker they had was Elandon Roberts, and I had him 18 stars, 2 skulls. I gave him a B+. Actually, I think I meant to give him an A-. So actually, I'll amend that there. So I gave him an A- on the year. Elandon Roberts was so consistently in the right place for the Steelers, and that was such a bonus. And for me, if I'm the Steelers, I am making sure that this guy is on the roster and starting next year as right next to Cole Holcomb, because Cole Holcomb's also signed to a decent deal. But he very much embodies the kind of linebacker that you'd want a Mark Robinson to learn under and develop into. He knows how to hit. He knows how to play well. He also knows how to help in the pass defense. He's not an expert cover linebacker or anything like that. He doesn't have the range to cover everybody, but he knows how to put himself in positions to challenge tight ends, running backs, and help in the spot without compromising his position in the defense. So that being said, the Steelers linebackers, all in all, withstood a lot of injuries this year and deserve credit for that. And I think that if they had stayed healthy, they could have been a bigger asset for the Steelers that might have helped them survive some of the games that they lost in that rough stretch towards the end of the season, where they lost 3 straight to the Cardinals, the Patriots, and the Colts. If they had those guys, maybe they limit the tight ends a little bit more against the Patriots. Maybe they limit James Conner and the tight ends against the Cardinals. That could have been something that happened in those games. But that being said, I still think that there were some good things there. I think the Steelers still should look in the draft to see if they can add one younger piece into the linebacker room who can learn behind these guys and maybe develop, so they don't need a whole bunch of older veterans to be leading the linebackers in 2025. But that being said, this is the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for joining us here. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers here. If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. You get a special shout out at the end of the show. Back tomorrow with Alan Saunders, more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.